Today I'm answering some of your questions because the truth of the matter is I receive a lot of questions via Instagram DMs, comments on my videos, emails, and it is just me, myself and I. So sometimes I struggle to reply to each and every one of you. So I decided to collate some of the more recent questions that I have received, especially from an Instagram story that I ran just the other week. And answer them in today's video and share with you insights into my life in Italy in general, and everything else in between. So the first question that I received was, how is my Italian language learning progressing? Am I able to converse more formally? It's a really good question, and my answer is, it is progressing. Because the thing with language learning is I don't believe there is ever an end destination. I think that you are constantly and continuously evolving and growing because there is always something new to learn and something that you can refine as a result. And so for me, my comprehension has improved massively. I can understand now more than I've ever been able to in the near 7 years that I've lived here. It does depend on the speed of the person that is speaking and also on whether or not they use a little bit of dialect. But generally speaking, if somebody speaks very clearly and not too fast, I can understand about 80% of what they say. There are always a few words that I never really follow, but generally speaking, I get the gist of what people are talking about. I'm able to turn on Italian television shows on the TV and be able to follow along with the majority of what they're talking about. So I feel really proud of myself in that respect. The part that is kind of letting me down a little bit is that I'm super blocked when it comes to speaking. I don't really know what it is. I think there is this deep-rooted fear of making mistakes, which is super ironic because the first thing that I say to my English students is, don't be afraid of making mistakes. But there you are. I'm good at giving advice, just not good at listening to myself. Isn't that always the way? But I know that that's going to come with time. And there are some things that I'm going to do post our move because really now my head is full of other things that are going to help me with that, including the possibility of taking up Italian conversation classes to really get me feeling more confident in speaking in group situations. So this is my kind of progress at the moment. And I think what's really helped me with this is that I got really laser focused on the material that I was using for my study, because I definitely had a bit of shiny object syndrome at the beginning where I wanted to buy everything and anything that said it would teach you Italian. And then not only that, I've also become really laser focused on the content that I consume online. So now I follow just one YouTube channel that helps me to learn Italian, which is better for me because then I don't have overwhelm because I'm following too many different people. So these things have definitely helped me and I'm really, really happy about my progress. But yeah, it's a journey. I don't think that you ever, there's Tina, fully arrive at your end destination. There's always something more that you can learn. My second question, how do you feel about your move back to Salerno? It's a good question, and I think my answer has evolved over time. So at the beginning, I was a little bit mixed in terms of how I felt about it. There were a few different emotions that I was processing. It's hard to believe, I know, because I'm very real with you about life here in Palermo, but I did actually feel settled here, and I did feel like I was starting to create a life for myself. However, life here in Palermo is not easy, and whilst I found myself here, my boyfriend hasn't been able to, and it's just not sustainable for us to continue to live here as we currently are. So the fact that we're moving back to the Salerno province for me, I know is an upgrade in our life. We are going to improve so many aspects of our life. I know that perhaps I'm going to be happier because Palermo really for me is a bit of a crazy city, and I kind of want to be somewhere where it's clean and organized and I can just relax mentally a little bit. So there are more pros now than cons the longer that I've sat with this decision. And also, I'm no longer afraid of change. I realise that with every change, it takes you somewhere better and leads you usually to a more improved part of your life. And so for me, change isn't something that I fear anymore, because when I look back at all the changes I've made here in Italy, they've always led me to something better. And so that's exactly how I'm viewing this move. There are many aspects of my life that will improve with this move. The fact that I'm going to be completely smart working is one, because I actually really love working from home. So There are lots and lots of benefits, absolutely. And I kind of feel like you've just got to go with the flow of life sometimes. Moving here to Palermo was a wonderful thing for me in so many different ways. I've definitely grown even more as a person, but going back to the Salerno province will also bring lots of new adventures because we're not moving back to a part of Salerno that we lived in before. So it's going to be a new experience and I'm ready for that. And now I have something to contrast Salerno with, which I didn't have at the beginning. So I feel like there's going to be an even deeper sense of appreciation as well. The third question, what's the deal with rental properties and kitchens? This is really good because this particular question was a comment on a YouTube video where I was talking about what it's like to move home here in Italy. And this particular person wanted me to do an entire video about the whole kitchen situation. Now, in all honesty, I'd struggle to do an entire video just about this one topic, but I do think it's worthy enough to talk about in this video because there are some distinct differences when it comes to renting properties here in Italy, notably that they don't always come with a fitted kitchen. Now, depending on what country you're coming from, this may come as a surprise. It certainly did to me. In the UK, it's not generally normal to rent a home without at least a fitted kitchen suite. Now, you may be lucky and find a home that does have a kitchen, but don't get too excited because usually it's very old, outdated and vintage. Or having said that, you may have a fully furnished home, in which case you're usually paying a premium for that aspect. So yeah, you have to get used to buying a lot more things for rental properties than you may be used to in your own country. Now, there are a couple of things that I would recommend that you do if you are planning to rent here in Italy and you do have to buy a kitchen. Do invest in quality. I'm not saying that you need to go all out and buy like the most expensive, elaborate kitchen you've ever seen, because we do have to remember you're renting. That kitchen may not work in your future home, and you don't know where you're going to end up next. But I do believe that doesn't mean you should go cheap. That was one of our mistakes and I do regret it now, 2.5 years later. So do invest in a quality kitchen, even if it's not the most elaborate one, just to make sure it's good quality. Because essentially, if you are going to continue to rent for a period of time, that kitchen will move with you. And you don't want to have to keep buying a new kitchen every few years. So that would be my advice to you. But yes, get ready. There are quite a few differences when it comes to renting. And if you're interested to know some other differences, then I suggest you watch this video up here. Okay, my next question, is Italy a good place to consider to transition into retirement? My answer is, I think it can be, but it does really depend on your personal situations. There are a few caveats that you need to think about. First and foremost, you need to consider whether or not you're willing or even able to learn the language, because of course, when you are older, it is not easy necessarily to pick up skills as easily as when you're younger. I'm not saying it's impossible. I really don't buy into this whole, well, when you're old, life becomes limited belief. I think that you can achieve anything at any stage of your life, but we do have to be realistic. Our attention spans do decrease the older we get. And so you have to be honest with yourself. Are you prepared to put in the work to learn the language? Because it's going to be very, very difficult for you to live here if you only speak in English, for example. Secondly, you've got to ask yourself, like, what kind of life you want to have here. Because even though you're retired, and no doubt you will have freedom of time in that sense, how do you want to spend your days? Do you want to be based somewhere where you can easily travel to other parts of Italy and is super well connected? Or are you happy to be in a more remote location and really have a chilled experience? This is something that you have to think about. Do you want to drive here or not? That's going to also kind of eliminate certain towns and villages that are more remote if you don't want to. You've also got to think about your budget as well, because certain parts of Italy are more expensive than others. And you also just want to think about like what your everyday life is going to look like here. Because I think when you come here for a short period of time, you see a certain side of Italy. But when you live in Italy on a long-term basis, you see it in its entirety. And it's not always as pretty and beautiful as you may have imagined. So you need to really be realistic with the kind of experiences you want to have, what you intend to do with your free time here in Italy, and also like how connected and, you know, free you want to feel in this country. So they are some caveats that I would definitely consider. But overall, I think it's a beautiful country to retire to. In fact, I actually think maybe it's one of the best stages of life to come to Italy in, because not only do you move here with a wealth of life experience, but also you have the freedom of time to be able to really enjoy this country and to its entirety. And also you do not have to deal with like the stresses of work or any other stresses like that a lot of people here have to deal with. So I think it can be really beautiful, but just make sure it's the right decision for you, especially because there are lots of these other factors that you have to take into consideration. Okay, my next question. Do you have any recommendations for families with kids who plan to move to Italy from America? Well, first and foremost, it's going to be very similar to what I was saying about people who plan to retire here. It can be a great experience, but there are so many other things that you have to factor into your decision. First and foremost, location is going to be paramount. You are going to want to be somewhere where you have access to educational facilities, schools, etc. But also you've got to think about your community. Where do you want to raise your child or children? Do you want to raise them in the city, in the countryside? Do you want to be with other families? What kind of lifestyle do you want to lead as a family itself? Then you've got to think about language as well, because of course, your children, unless they go to a bilingual school, are going to go straight into an Italian school where English is only taught as a subject a few hours a week. So you've got to consider that for them as well. Are you going to consider giving them extra tuition in private Italian lessons to help them? So there's this area. You've also got to educate yourself on the Italian education system here, because it does differ to other countries. And so you need to be aware of the process and also the specialist schools that children can choose when it comes to high school. There are different specialist schools here in Italy that children go to. Some specialise in languages, some specialise in scientific subjects. So you do need to consider this aspect as well. You also need to think about your work issues. Now, if you want to come here and you are a professional employee, then you need to consider getting your certifications translated, because even if you are, say, an engineer, which I think you may have been, if I remember well from your comment on YouTube, you need to make sure that your certifications that are valid in America can also be recognised here in Italy. And usually there is a process to follow for that, and you can find information about that on the Italian government website. But essentially, you've got to be realistic with your own personal expectations. What do you want as a family? What do you want your life to look like? Do you have a particular preference as to what part of Italy you want to move to? What is your budget? Like, just set your expectations straight. I think this is the most important thing. A lot of people think it's going to be easier to adjust here in Italy when you have a family. It's not always the case, particularly if you have any language difficulties. So just be really clear on what your non-negotiables are as a family unit to help you to pinpoint where in Italy might be best, and even if it's going to be the right decision for you. And then I had this lovely comment. I just want to wish you a fabulous day. This was in response to my Instagram story that I ran asking for your questions. And I wanted to say thank you, because I know that so many of you appreciate the content that I produce, and it means the world to me to hear that, to see the connection with you, to see your comments on my videos, because let's face it, the internet is full of a lot of trolls, and I see them here on my YouTube channel, people who are so quick to want to ridicule what you've spoken about or discredit you or whatever it may be. I don't have time for that, and I know that you don't either. At the end of the day, what I present to you is a very balanced perspective of life here in Italy. Take it or leave it. And I'm really grateful that so many of you appreciate the content that I produce. So thank you so much for these kinds of comments. And I guess this is the perfect way to close this video. Thank you for your support. I will keep doing what I'm doing and keep asking me your questions. And I'll probably do another video like this very soon. I'll see you in the next video.